The Golden Pavilion did not simply host events, it ratified social standing. Its chandeliers, dripping with enough Czech crystal to ransom a small duke, cast a forgiving light on the nouveau riche of the district, polishing their ambitions into a patina of old money. On this Saturday in September, it held the wedding of Artem Leonidovich. Every detail, from the specific vintage of the champagne to the exact shade of ivory in the napkin folds, bore the fingerprint of one woman, Tamara Genadivna, the groom's mother. She had personally approved the canapés, no garlic, it was vulgar, vetoed the string quartet, a piano was more refined, and selected the grandiflora roses herself, demanding stems of precisely 60 centimeters. It was less a matter of trust and more one of territory. Tamara was a sovereign in a Chanel suit, her sovereignty marked by the heavy gold rings that stacked on every finger like miniature fortress walls. Her gaze, a cool, assessing blue, was legendary at the local market. Vendors, feeling its chill, would often find themselves mysteriously lowering prices before a word was even spoken. Her domain was substantial. Alongside her husband Leonid's empire of auto repair shops and electronics boutiques, her own family presided over a chain of prosperous construction supply stores. Their world was one of concrete, steel, and favorable margins. Today, their world filled two-thirds of the opulent hall. The air thrummed with the confident baritone of men discussing deals, punctuated by the sharp, silver laughter of their wives. Gestures were wide, watches were slender and expensive, and there was a palpable, unshakable certainty that this was simply the natural order of things, a celebration of their own continued ascent. At the center of it all, for now, was her son Artem. Tall, with his father's strong build and his mother's exacting posture, he moved through the crowd with the dutiful grace of a crown prince. The wedding was, in many ways, the family's latest and most public acquisition. Yet, as Tamara's eyes briefly scanned the quieter corner of the room, a slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her jawline suggested this particular acquisition came with an irregular, and not entirely welcome, provenance. The kingdom had its quiet, annexed province. Across a gulf of polished parquet, huddled around three tables that seemed to shrink under the cavernous ceiling, sat the bride's contingent. Alina was a silhouette cut from different cloth than the vibrant tapestries of the hall. Where the other women shone in vibrant silks, she was a study in muted pearl. Her wedding gown, though lovely, lacked architectural grandeur. It simply flowed. Her fair hair was swept into a gentle knot, from which a few strands had already escaped, softening the line of her neck. But it was her eyes that held the story, large, a shade of gray-green like sea glass. They held a permanent, gentle melancholy, as if reflecting a light from a cloudy sky. She smiled, but it was a quiet gesture, often directed at the floor or her clasped hands. Her anchor in the room, or perhaps its most spectral presence, was her father, Viktor Stepanovich. He sat at the very edge of their grouping, a man carved from worn stone. His suit, a new purchase for the occasion, was a simple, sober blue. It hung on his broad, stooped frame with the unfamiliarity of a uniform. His hands, resting on the tablecloth, were a landscape of hardened skin and thickened knuckles, a stark, honest map of a lifetime of manual labor. He moved little, spoke less. His gaze was not for the glittering crowd, but seemed fixed on a point somewhere near the base of his water glass, as if reading a familiar, sorrowful text in its condensation. Their party was small, an island of stillness in the sea of noise. A handful of faces, an elderly aunt who smelled of mothballs and kindness, two of Alina's friends from teachers' college, whispering nervously, a kind-faced neighbor, Aunt Zoya, who had fussed with Alina's veil that morning. The space around them seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it, creating a pocket of quiet dignity that felt, in this temple of excess, almost rebellious. The unspoken history was palpable. Alina's mother, Natasha, was a ghost at this feast, having lost her long battle with illness when Alina was just 5. Since then, the world for the two of them had been the four walls of a communal apartment and the relentless, rhythmic life of the factory where Victor worked. He had raised his daughter on a diet of silent endurance and deep, wordless love, a language as foreign to this gilded hall as the calluses on his palms. The divide was not merely spatial, it was a fundamental fissure in the order of things, and it hummed in the air like a dissonant chord beneath the festive music. For Tamara Genadivna, Alina was not a daughter-in-law to be welcomed, but a variable to be managed. She viewed the girl with the strained tolerance one reserves for a persistent, inconvenient draft, something to be endured because sealing it off entirely was, for now, too much trouble. The word she used in private to her sister Raisa was tolerable. It was a word that spoke of compromise, of settling. In the secret ledger of her ambitions, Alina's entry was a deficit. No family connections of value, no education from a prestigious academy, no whisper of a dowry. Her only discernible asset was a pliant nature, which Tamara noted with the relief of a strategist finding a single stable point in unreliable terrain. "At least she's biddable," she had muttered, the backhanded compliment hanging in the smoke of their pre-wedding cigarettes. The whispers between the sisters were a liturgy of disdain. "Look at him," Raisa had hissed during the awkward acquaintance dinner, her eyes starting to Victor, who sat silent as a monument. A man of what, exactly? He could offer her a share of the laundry line in their communal corridor. A legacy of concrete dust. They spoke of Victor not with anger, but with a cold, anthropological curiosity, as if studying a creature from an ecosystem that should have naturally died out. His silence was interpreted as emptiness, his worn hands as evidence of a life not properly leveraged. On the other side of the chasm, Victor's silence was a fortress. He heard the unasked questions, felt the weight of the glances that swept over his cheap new suit and lingered on his daughter's simple dress. He saw the way Artem's uncles clapped shoulders with a booming, proprietary warmth that never extended in his direction. In their world, a man was measured by his balance sheet, his network, the square footage of his influence. By those metrics, Victor knew he registered as zero. A nullity. His entire worth, the sum of his life's labor and love, sat beside him in the form of his daughter, a value these people could never compute. The wedding table, with its towering floral arrangements, was not a bridge but a partition. One side spoke the loud language of acquisition and display. The other spoke in the quiet, resilient tongue of survival. And between them flowed a river of mutual, profound incomprehension. The formalities unfolded with the polished inevitability of a well-rehearsed play. Under the glittering cascade of the central chandelier, Alina and Artem stood, their hands clasped. A priest's voice, rich and sonorous, wove traditional words about unity and faith into the air. Victor, standing a pace behind his daughter, looked paler than the ivory of her dress. A faint sheen of sweat glistened at his temples. When Alina briefly turned to him, her eyes wide with a silent question, she saw the knot of his tie was askew. With fingers that trembled slightly, she reached up and adjusted it, her touch lingering for a second on the coarse fabric. He offered her the ghost of a smile, a mere twitch of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "It's all right, Lapachka," he breathed, the old childhood endearment sounding strange and fragile in the grandeur of the hall. "Everything will be all right." Then came the liturgy of gifts, the public accounting of affection and power. Leonid, Artem's father, took the microphone first. His voice was a confident baritone, accustomed to command. He spoke of legacy, of strong foundations, of the proud day a son steps into his future. "And we are happy," he boomed, his gaze sweeping over Alina with a magnanimous air, "that he has chosen a girl of such modest grace and evident decency." The word modest landed with the soft thud of a discount, and decency sounded less like a virtue and more like a surprise discovery. Tamara's presentation was a theatrical masterpiece of benevolence. With a flourish, she produced a single, symbolic key on a velvet pillow. "For the newlyweds," she announced, her voice carrying to the farthest corners a small nest. "Not our newest property, of course, but from our own portfolio, fully renovated, tastefully furnished. A proper start." The applause was thunderous, a roaring approval of such practical munificence. Not to be outdone, Raisa, Tamara's sister, ascended next. She carried no velvet, only a simple, pristine white envelope. but its size and the distinct, crisp sound it made as she tapped it against the microphone spoke volumes. "For your dreams, my dears," she said with a knowing smile. A murmur of appreciation rippled through her side of the family. Everyone understood the language of that envelope. It whispered of at least 300,000, maybe more. It was liquidity, freedom, a vote of confidence in their currency. A expectant, then slightly awkward, pause settled over the room. All eyes, now, drifted naturally, some with curiosity, many with a poorly concealed, patronizing pity, toward the quiet man in the simple blue suit. The toastmaster, sensing the shift, cleared his throat. "And now," he said, his cheerful tone faltering for just a beat, "a gift from the father of the bride. Viktor Stepanovich, if you please."